Okay, thank you, Jessica. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the work and efforts that Pigeon Mountain and the MRA have put into making these seminars available. So far, I've been able to watch 2 of the previous seminars and found them to be both educational and for my personal benefit, and hopefully have started to incorporate some of those things into how I work with and manage search and rescue incidents. The Lost Person Questionnaire is something that I first became exposed to in the early 1980s, and I'll tell a little more on that in a minute. But I found it to be an extremely useful tool that has helped us in many ways here in Utah County and in some other counties that I've been able to associate with at times. A little bit about me can be seen there. I began my volunteer career in search and rescue back in 1972. Other than a couple of years that I lived out of state, I've been associated with this team and have had a number of experiences in rescue and emergency services. I have a disclaimer. I saw this on one of the previous ones and felt that it was extremely appropriate in this case. The Lost Person Questionnaire and other similar documents were developed by others. They are not my creation. However, we have locally here in Utah County been able to make some additions and modifications that have proven to be helpful and useful in our searches. And I'll relate that I first became aware of the Lost Person Questionnaire in the early 80s when I read a book by Tim Setnica called Wilderness Search and Rescue. Tim was a National Park Service employee, and together with members of NASAR, they had collaborated and created a document which is of what you see today, 95% of it is as it was created. There are only a few additions and modifications which we have made to the subject matter. But during the last 5 or 6 years, here in our county, we've taken that information and we've attempted to make it more usable as a search management tool. The Emergency Services Division, both the deputies and the administrative staff have worked tirelessly with me to create a document that is now available as an Acrobat PDF that's fillable, both from the front end and the back end, and I'll explain a little bit more regarding that. But the bottom line, which I have in the middle on this, all search managers and incident commanders stand on the shoulders of those individuals who went before us. The document that they created and the ability to take that and use it using today's technology can make a substantial difference in the outcome of searches as we know them today. The website for the Utah County Sheriff's Office is shown there at the bottom, and I'll give you a quick little look at what you can see. If you click on that page, this is essentially the page that you'll see under the section up above that says Enforcement Bureau. If you went in there under Emergency Services, you'd also find Utah County Sheriff Search and Rescue. What I'm going to show you now is also found under our links that are there. But here, the quick links, Lost Person Questionnaire PDF, Lost Person Questionnaire for Special Needs in a PDF form. Again, these are an Acrobat fillable PDF so that as you enter data, one of the big things is it's readable. It's also downloadable. You don't have to scan it and fax it or whatever. It just makes it extremely useful. This is a list of things that I want to make sure that I cover adequately today. So I'm going to hit them first, tell you what you're going to hear, and then you're going to hear it quickly. The online form that's available will help you, particularly if you're sharing information between interagency. If you fill out the form with the base information and you know that your subject comes from another city, state, or as in one search that we conducted a number of years ago, I had to fill out the base of information and then fax it to Stockholm, Sweden to gain information about the subject we were looking for. Why Stockholm, Sweden? Well, our county has two large universities that are about 10 minutes away from our mountains. Population of students of those two universities is approximately 80,000. And for many of those students, when they arrive in Utah County, they find themselves surrounded by mountain peaks that are upwards of 12,000 feet. They have immediate access within literally minutes of lakes, trails, rivers, and a variety of things that places them in a totally unfamiliar area. So gathering in intelligence from outside resources is a technique that we use frequently. I've noted there that we want you to print clearly if you're writing by hand, and the key word there is print. You'll see why in a minute. Use a dark colored pen or pencil if you're writing it by hand. I'll go back to the new form that's available online. Can be entered in as a PDF, and it is all very legible. But frequently you have to do this while you're on the road or working out of the command post and may not have access to a computer. Don't abbreviate. Avoid confusing phrases if at all possible. Keep in mind that clues provided may not be accurate. Horror stories are legion, following the wrong clues, but at the time you didn't know it. It's important that you write down what the individual said, not your interpretation of what was said. Words have meanings, and the individuals that you're interrogating have used a particular word that is descriptive to them. Don't write your interpretation of it. It's important, I'm a strong believer that one interview is never enough. Try to gain as much perspective as you can by doing multiple interviews. The spouse of a missing individual does not know what's been going on, usually at the person's employment, where the employer who just recently fired that individual has a perspective of the missing person that's completely different to that which the coworker is aware of. The college roommate knows things that are completely different than the parents or the coworker. Clergy and physicians, when it's particularly when we're dealing with a despondent or suicidal type person, the clergy and a physician may know things that, again, parents or employers are completely unaware of regarding the mental status, the physical health, or any number of things. And so when it's appropriate, seeking out those individuals for their input can be very beneficial. A neighbor might know more about what's been going on behind the scenes, and the ever-present, by today's standards, the social media, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. It's important that you I believe that you use when possible, a forensic technologist who knows how to essentially conduct an interview of the cell phone or their computer, their laptop. The computer that's at their office has different information than the iPad that they carry around with them or their cell phone. It's important to know the carrier that the cell number is attached to and the cell phone number. It is not infrequent at all that an individual is carrying more than one cell phone. I have a daughter who carries two. They are by different carriers. One she uses for work, one she uses for everything else. The information contained in those, the social media sites, if they are used, may be completely different between cell phones. The same is true with computers. And so gaining access to and looking through recent text messages, postings, photographs, blog sites, anything like that may find valuable clues for you that you could consider the same as conducting a one-on-one interview with an individual. As you conduct with the social media, make sure you get the name and the password. And again, the parents may not know, even the spouse may not know the password. They might know the name of the individual. You may have to do a little investigative work, but continue to ask those questions with each person that you interview. You may find out a number of items that were unknown by others. Continuing on, thorough interviews allow additional pertinent information to be disseminated to field teams. In today's world, as opposed to that from the 1970s and 80s when the Lost Person Questionnaire was developed, clues that are attained right now can immediately be disseminated through the use of the internet. Photographs can be sent to field team members' cell phones, and you don't have to rely on people coming in for a rehab every 4 or 8 hours and being able to update them on the situation, or putting out information on the radio that you'd rather not do because the media is listening to your conversations and some information may be highly sensitive. So update your field teams when they come in at briefings. Update from the command post via your via cell phones with photos and or pertinent data. And ask that your field teams, as they come across data in the field, take photos and send that back to the command post for evaluation by your overhead team that's managing the incident, and more than likely has more information than what has been published to the field. Update your list of clues regularly. Keep your law enforcement contacts informed. As appropriate, keep your field teams informed. Okay, a little bit more about the form itself, that we'll go into here in just a minute. About 8 years ago, we made a change in the form, and we started highlighting items in red. The red items were those items which we felt were important for search managers and field teams to know in that first 10 minutes. If you are a current search manager and have experienced a search that always seems like it's the rest of the world because you have no real information to work with, and so you assign someone to go do the Lost Person Questionnaire and gain some critical information, and 2 hours later they come in, hand you the document, and you have to try to filter through it, and all along your teams are going filling out, but they don't really know what they're searching for because you've been waiting for that information. And so in the Lost Person Questionnaire that we are using today, that's found on the website that was provided, items that are covered in red on pages 1 through 8 automatically post themselves to the 9th page, page 9. It works in reverse though, and that has to do with a technological glitch that I haven't been able to work out yet. I will eventually, I think, have that corrected where it's page 1. But it works backwards and forwards. If I need to conduct a 10-minute interview, I can pull out the information off of page 9, go to it on the website, enter it in the computer, and it will automatically post on pages 1 through 8 in the appropriate locations. If I need to have a family member who last saw that individual 3 days ago, but they happen to live in Chicago, I can have the form sent through the internet to Chicago PD and have them conduct an interview. One last thing on doing the interviews. I'm a firm believer that the best interviewer for a search and rescue related incident is an experienced search and rescuer. I don't believe, and I'm not a fan of, law enforcement experienced investigators conducting the interviews. They tend to couch their questions from a law enforcement type background, and that may turn off or turn off the spigot, so to speak, of the flow of information. I'm not saying that we don't do it with the intent of providing the information for law enforcement, because we are conducting a search. But it's important to keep in mind that our frame of mind couches how we ask questions. And developing a relationship with the person being interviewed is critical. And they need to feel confident in that the information is being provided to help locate the person without fear of citation or arrest being an outcome. Moving along. This is what page 1 has looked like since its original inception in the 70s, other than the fact that I've had it changed to make some red lines. Some of the items are covered in red. The basic form itself has not changed in 30 to 40 years very much. So that's what page 1 of the Lost Person Questionnaire looks like. You begin filling it in either by hand, by typewriter. You might be in conversation with someone on the phone, whatever. I'm going to go through these quickly, and begins with the general information that you're asked for. And there's a note there to print clearly. Avoid phrases and words that might be unfamiliar. It might be familiar to you as the person writing it. It may be unfamiliar to the person who sits in the command post 6 hours later and reads 5 of these done by 5 different individuals and try to figure out what was being stated. This is as an example of a recent one in a nearby community. This is the page from a search that we were looking for, assisting with looking for an individual who is missing. And this is one of the pages I had to try to interpret what was being written. I will and I've enhanced this to make it look darker so that it is more readable here on the screen. It took a lot of time to decipher what the words were, how they flow, one word to the next, and what the intent of what the answers were. I'll go back to a police print. It really does make a difference. Source of information. Who is it you're interviewing? How can they be located? Do they have a relationship to the individual? What do they believe happened? Who is the person that they're looking for? I'll point out again the name and nicknames, cell phone carrier and cell phone, sex. Those are in red, which means that if you happen to fill out page 9 on the form online, it will automatically be printed for you on page 1 in the appropriate spaces if you happen to do this while online. A physical description of so that you can provide information to your teams in the field, who it is you're looking for. And do you have a photo available? If so, does it need to be returned? Again, going back to the search manager who is waiting for 2 hours for the Lost Person Questionnaire to get some basic information so that he can turn his field teams loose, can and frequently is very frustrating, where if you can get that information out initially, it will greatly enhance your search efforts, frequently that are time-related due to the sun setting or something like that, or a storm approaching. What were the plans of the subject? Have they ever done it before? How long did they plan to be gone? What clothing were they wearing? What clothing did they have in their backpack? Again, we have thousands of square miles in our county of usable backcountry camping wilderness type areas with a great deal of a lot of rivers, lakes, a great variety. This form was developed, it has universal usage, but a key element there is the overall coloration as seen from the air. In Utah County, we are the benefactors of having quick access on many occasions to both fixed-wing and rotor helicopters to assist us in searching. The pilot doesn't necessarily need to know what the color of underwear and socks are, but they do need to know what the overall color from the air would look like. So that's one of the items highlighted in red that we want to get out immediately. Clothing descriptions. This is one of the pitfalls, can be. This is from an incident that occurred a couple of months ago in a neighboring community. And on the left is a page from the Lost Person Questionnaire that lists the clothing worn, and it's hard to read. I've enhanced it as best I could, but I've put an arrow there to the side that shows that the individual was believed to be wearing Saucony certain type of shoe and a certain size. This was later corroborated by another person who was interviewed, but it was not done on the Lost Person Questionnaire, so I don't have a corroborating sheet for that. When that information was brought into the command post, one of the immediate things that was done was to go on the web, find that specific type of shoe. It was noted that it has a very specific pattern. It was recognized by a number of people who are familiar with the shoe. That information was immediately sent out to all field teams via their cell phone. Every member of our search and rescue team and other agencies that were involved with in the search were provided that shoe print for them to, as an aid, as a possible clue to be used during the search. This information went out immediately. One of the great benefits of the technology, the time we live in. Within approximately an hour, a canine team came across in a small portion of a track in the sand or dirt that matched that. It was of the appropriate size. It was within the known search area. things we thought we had a decent lead, a clue. Within another hour, at a much larger track trap area that was gone through, a complete track that matched the size of the woman shoe that we were looking for, that we believed this was the shoe that she was wearing, then corroborated by 2 individuals. A couple of hours later, this was inside of a community on a mountainside, and neighbors, community members had been notified of the search that was going on. A 6-year-old girl noticed high on a hillside that there was a person sitting all alone. She pointed that out to her father, who, 2 and 2 together, notified through 911. The command post was notified, and teams were dispatched immediately to render aid. The woman was located. She was dehydrated, had some relatively minor injuries, but was in need of assistance, and she was cared for, brought down to the command post, debriefed by members of the law enforcement and others, and she and her father were allowed to leave, at which time I happened to notice that what type of shoe she was wearing. And in our debriefing that occurred, everyone was congratulating themselves on how well the search had gone, that they'd found the shoe prints in the sand. The woman was found really not too far from that location. It was reasonable to assume that this great clue had been instrumental in helping to find her. In reality, the woman was wearing flip-flops, and that shoe print was put there by someone else or at some other time, and had absolutely no relationship that we could ever determine to the search. So it was a potential clue which proved to be wrong, and such as it is. That's just the nature of search. So where was the person last seen? Again, if you're interviewing someone who's in another country, they may not have seen the individual for several years. That's not uncommon here in Utah County, where students come from other countries and they are here for 3 to 4 years while they go to the universities. And other than possibly on Skype or a quick trip home, may not have been seen by the person that you're interviewing. But gather whatever information you can from them. What is their outdoor experience? This will help you evaluate their knowledge and skills, what resources mentally, and how well can they improvise. Are they familiar with the area? Will they stay on the trail, or are they likely to go cross-country? Again, it's just that individual's opinion, but it helps you to evaluate a frame of mind for the person. What are their habits and personality? This page, this section contains a great deal of information that for me has proved to be useful in a number of ways, and I've got some examples to show you related to that. So I'm going to cover some of them and point out how they affected a search. And I'll note that it became an unsuccessful search. To this date, we have not located this man who was missing. But does this person smoke? How often? What? What brand? Alcohol use, recreational drugs, gum, candies, other things that they eat. And I'll point out hitchhiking. These are some items that I've highlighted. Interview number 1 of a young man who had gone camping. He had recently lost his job. He went to his favorite campsite. His best friend was going to meet him there a day later. He wasn't necessarily classified as being despondent, but there was a note that was found in the vehicle that indicated that he did not want to be found. This interview that I conducted was with the man's father, and I'll note that the father says he does smoke about a half a pack a day, that he smoked Marlboro Light and Marlboro Reds. He used alcohol some, but my recollection is he said it was only on weekends and only when he goes camping, and that's just a very little bit, that it would be beer and either Budweiser in cans or Miller, that's bottles of Miller beer. That he never chews gum. He likes Charleston Chews, chocolate, and Reese's. And it's doubtful he would hitchhike. That would be a very difficult thing for this 21-year-old, as I recall, to do. I'll point out here that when we found the vehicle had been located by deputies, both inside the truck, outside in the truck bed, and around the man's campsite were lots of Budweiser cans of beer. There was evidence of a number of other things. Interview number 2 that I conducted was with the missing man's brother, who indicated that yes, he smokes. He smokes 3/4 of a pack a day. It would be Marlboro Reds. He drinks alcohol every night. He drinks a 6-pack of beer. That would be either Budweiser or Miller, cans and bottles. Occasional use of marijuana. Occasionally chews gum. Seldom, if ever, eats candy, but does use chewing tobacco that's going to be Skoal brand or wintergreen or cherry. And we did find wintergreen Skoal in the truck as well. That was a good confirmation. Interview number 3 was with the young man who was going to go camping with him that came up the next day and found that the campsite was completely empty and that the man was missing. Yes, he smokes. He smokes a pack a day. It's going to be Marlboro Reds. He drinks alcohol every day, 3 to 4 cans of beer. It'll be Budweiser, but he also likes his Seagram's VO, does a little pot occasionally. But in addition to the candy that he eats, the Reese's peanut butter, Rolos, licorice, and the Skoal could be peppermint in a blue can, or potentially beef jerky and teriyaki, and I have noted they're peppered. I didn't know that teriyaki becomes peppered, so I probably should have put more information about how that fits in, but needless to say, beef jerky, licorice, Rolos, beer, Skoal, cigarettes, all of those things can be added to the list of clues that field teams are searching for if you get that information out to them. Noted that he would hitchhike, but not easily. So that's 3 different interviews from 3 different people that give a somewhat different perspective, actually a very different perspective about the individual and what the types of things that the individual uses. We want to know their general health. Do they have any handicaps or psychological problems, any deformities, anything like that are helpful. What personal items are they carrying if they've gone camping in particular, or fishing, or backcountry skiing? Of particular note in there towards the middle is firearms. field teams and law enforcement need to know if we're, particularly on suicidal individuals, despondents, are they likely to be carrying? All of your field team members need to know that before they go out. This is a section that we added about 6 years ago. This was not found in the original, but electronic equipment is so prevalent today. As we go through our canyons and the skateboard trails, the bike trails, nearly every person that we encounter has headphones. They're listening to music or books on tapes as they go for walks and things. All of these electronic items are potential clues. I've picked up thumb drives along trails. I've found headphones laying on rocks, iPods and things that are not typical to get left, but sometimes they fall out of backpacks and things. And coincidentally, within the previous 2 weeks, that first item, PLBs or EPIRBs, in our county, within the past 2 weeks, we've had 2 searches where Spot Me devices were activated, requiring searches and rescues here in our county. They are becoming more popular, and you should, if you don't know how to use that information that's gained from those, encourage you to become aware. The picture of my granddaughter, we went on a hike. She's got her earbuds in. She's listening to the music and stuff. And I'll be honest, I staged this next photograph, the one on the right, but it is so common that it doesn't happen as frequently if the earbuds are threaded up through their clothing, but I see people constantly around town and on the trails that are wearing their earbuds out. And if you look closely, this is the reminder as you meet with your search teams and send them into the field, that the search is not for the person, the search is for the clues. And not all clues can be found on the ground. They're found in the bushes. They're found on the rocks in the area where people have sat down to eat or drink or urinate or defecate or whatever. There are lots of clues out there. People, things fall out, they get dropped frequently, and then there's canine and how the canine use their noses, a great search technique that can be implemented. So if you look closely at the picture on the right, you'll find that the earbuds are picked off and are hanging there in the tree. But you have to become clue aware. Upon reaching civilization, what is the person likely to do? That's just their opinion. But if you're interviewing someone and they know the person well enough to provide you with 1 or 2 or 3 names of individuals that might be the contact if they were to come back. It might be grandma, it might be their best friend, it might be a companion from 6 months ago who they developed a special relationship with and became a buddy or a chat room pen pal, so to speak. Well, lo and behold, you now have the contacts for 3 more people, potentially 3 more people, that you could do a lost person questionnaire. If they honestly believe that this would be the person that the lost person's going to contact, that indicates a strong relationship with the individual. So go interview them. Spend some time with them and get their perspective on it. This can be valuable information to you. Children, what will they do if it gets dark? How will they act with unrecognized adults? Groups, the interactions with groups, not very common to have them turn up loose in our area, but I know in Yosemite and some of the large national parks, those types of areas, groups being overdue is very common. So you need to learn about who the leader is, what are the dynamics, anything that you can gain, the individual players, how they would interact, and potential clashes. You may end up with starting out with one group that because of internal strife that occurs, they separate, and you might end up in multiple searches. What has the family done so far? What actions have they taken, and what is the result? Unfortunately, at least in our county, this frequently results in that our search has expanded from one individual to now we need to look for 3, because the father and the oldest son have taken off and they haven't been heard from. Their cell phones have died or their radio batteries have died and contact's been lost with them as well. So trying to determine who else is out there, what's being done, could be very helpful to you. Do they want the press notified? How would they like press relations handled? A key question on this one, the other information, what haven't I asked you? I'm going to try to quickly relate an incident. Many years ago, a group of 3 hunters were reported overdue in a neighboring county, one of which had family in our county. Keeping this brief, on day 3 of the search, the family from our county called our sheriff's office and asked us to get involved because it wasn't our search. The search was not in our area. We had already extended an invitation to the sheriff involved. We would assist in any way if we could. We had not been asked for that help. However, my lieutenant determined through a series of questions that information gathering had not been as extensive as it probably should be. And he requested that I travel to a neighboring county, to Salt Lake County, and interview a family up there that had a relationship with the other group, the group that was lost, and conduct an extensive lost person questionnaire. A companion and I went up. We started with, I took the father, he took the mother. We conducted an interview with them for about an hour. And during that interview, it became apparent to me that the key person to interview was the son, their son, who was watching television in the room, in the neighboring room. Received permission, and over the next hour and a half, I interviewed that young man. That young man had intended to go hunting with his friends. They'd been caught in a storm. This was the big news in the state of Utah at the time, this missing group of 3 hunters, young people. Over a period of time, I gained his confidence that I could be trusted, that I wasn't seeking in any way to find fault with anything that had been done. We wanted only to find the 3 missing individuals. And when I asked him, what haven't I asked you? He confided in me, that he'd been sworn to secrecy. The 4 young men, 3 of which are missing, never had any intention of going to the place where they told their parents. They would in no way go hunting at that location, but they didn't want their families to know. And that they, in fact, their trip plans were to go 40 miles away in a totally different county on a certain road, that they'd be so many miles back country. And to make a long story short, about midnight that night, I contacted my lieutenant. The appropriate counties were notified. The next morning, snowmobile and aircraft were sent out. The storm had started to subside. There'd been over 3 feet of snow fallen during that 3 to 4 days. And the 3 young men were located. Their truck was out of gas, stuck in a ravine. They had consumed all of their food, all of their water. They were dehydrated, hypothermic, and it is seriously questionable whether they would have survived another night. But the young man had sworn an oath, so to speak, of secrecy, and he wasn't about to divulge it for fear of retribution or legal action coming against him. It is a key question to ask. Here's a place for you to fill in with social networking, and we've provided lots of space for new and other ones that I'm not aware of. Make sure you get both the username and the password. That ends the Lost Person Questionnaire for pages 1 through 8, and you see this form for page 9, which again is backfillable. If you fill this one out in the hasty mode, so to speak, it will automatically print those items for you on pages 1 through 8 in the appropriate spaces. In addition, we have created in a usable PDF format the form that was developed by the Justice Department, but their form wasn't in a Acrobat style. It was, you had to hand print it in essentially and then scan it and email it if you wanted information. So this form is essentially the same type of information that's available, and you can see that. Fill those things out. There's a number of items, particularly on this one. What are the attractants for these children that have special needs? And at this point, I'm going to ask Jared Hansen, the current commander of Utah County Sheriff's Search and Rescue, to join with me and relate an incident that occurred that is specifically along this line. Jared?
We had been called to assist in an urban search for a 9-year-old boy who was autistic. At the time we'd been called, the local police department, fire department had been searching for this child for about 5 hours. Once we arrived on scene, we immediately made some hasty assignments to our teams, but basically they were doing about the same things that the police and fire department had been doing, and then we started to interview the parents. And as we interviewed the parents, we were told that this child had went missing several times before, and in all cases he'd always been found in the trunk of one of the family's cars. So the obvious question was, have the trunks been searched? And they assured us that the trunks had been looked in. At that point, we asked to be able to have some of our people research the home, which happened. We asked again if we could search the trunks. We were assured that that had been done, and we didn't need to worry about that. We continued through the interview process. As you can see from what Alan's done, it takes considerable time to go all the way through the form, and at one point, our sergeant was told by one of the other PD officers that we don't want to do this, we want you to find this kid. And so at that point the interview was terminated. We searched through most of that initial evening without any results. We began again the next morning. At some point in the afternoon of the next day, an ice cream truck went past the car that the family had been driving for approximately the previous 20 to 22 hours as they searched for this kid. As they passed the ice cream truck with the music playing, they heard a banging coming from the trunk, and the child was located in the trunk of the car and had been there through this entire time, and probably had ridden over 100 miles as they had driven around their city looking for the child. And so I think the lesson I learned from that is once we get called in as volunteers, we just every time want to start it like it's a brand new search and check all of those things ourselves.
Thank you, Jared. That's a search I wasn't involved in, and Jared was able to share it from a first-person standpoint. A great lesson learned. Unfortunately, search and rescue, well, fortunately, search and rescue has a different perspective that law enforcement and fire don't always have. This pretty well concludes, another page, pretty well concludes our presentation. My email is there if you care to contact me offline. And at this point, Jessica, I'm going to turn the time back over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Alan. I'm going to go ahead and switch the screen back over to my screen. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and type them into your chat/questions area of your control panel, and we can go over them. Let's see. Okay. We don't have any questions so far, so I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping this up, but please, if you do have questions, go ahead and type them in and we will get them, we will go ahead and answer them before we end the presentation today. If you have any further questions that we don't get to today or that you come up with later, you can, as Alan said, email him at the email shown on the screen. And the MRA webinar series hosts webinars frequently, so you can keep an eye on the MRA and PMI websites for the future dates and topics at the URLs shown on your screen. And for news and updates, you can follow MRA and PMI on Facebook and Twitter. We post the webinars that are upcoming as well as a bunch of other information onto both of those social media sites. So, looks like we don't have any questions, so I think that we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. If you do come up with any questions in the future, feel free to email Alan, and we hope that you enjoyed the presentation and that it was helpful for you guys. And